Hi folks, Modelling Mark here again with pack 2 of Agora's USS Constitution. Here's where we got to in the first pack. First few frames installed and the first few beams on the lower deck are installed. For this pack we're going to fit these frames here, and then we're going to stick on some more deck beams and do a little bit of work on a mast. Now the first task was to prepare the frames. Yeah, I've already done this because it's quite long and tedious, and you saw exactly how I did it in pack 1. So if you want to recap on how I did them, just go back and check pack 1 part 1. And I have also pre-cut all the deck beams. Again, if you want to see how I did that, pack 1, part 1, the method is exactly the same. Again, the method for fitting the frames is quite straightforward, same as pack 1, part 2 I believe. Take the frames, making sure I've got the cut line where I'm going to cut the hull in half on the starboard side. And that will get fitted like that and glued in place, making sure that the tops of the frames are more or less in line. I'm using Evo stick wood glue, any PVA wood glue will do. Last time I was using cocktail sticks, this time I'm going to be using a tatty old paintbrush. Which we just apply glue. I think it's actually slightly easier with the paintbrush, but make sure it's not one of your good ones. Then remove any excess glue. Making sure it looks in line. Then we carry on, dry fit each one. I'll do the rest with movie magic. And that completes the first 19 frames. Now I'm going to put that aside for the moment. I'm going to let that dry before I go any further on there, so I don't knock anything when I'm putting the beams in. So the mast has got to have the bottom 5mm reduced in diameter from 10 to about 6mm. and that is going to sit inside this hole, which is the mast step. That's the bit that goes on the keel that the mast sits in. I should mark 5mm. Right, that's 5mm marked at several points. Now I shall take some masking tape put a couple of wraps round. Now I've got a much better line to work to. I've got a slightly different approach to the instructions. I'm going to take a razor saw and start by making a shallow cut all the way round. Ideally you want to go down 2mm, but I defy anybody to cut 2mm accurately. So now we take the knife and carefully par away. Being very careful of your fingers. And if I look a bit awkward doing this, it's because I'm keeping my head out of the way so you can see what's going on. Now, if you're going to use this method, use a sharp blade, because a sharp blade is more controllable than a blunt blade. You're less likely to cut your fingers. Go around taking small slithers off. Now I'm going to have to do the rest off camera so I can see what I'm doing. Now, if you keep going around evenly, checking it often, it's not too difficult to end up with a nice reduced diameter that's reasonably concentric and reasonably round. It doesn't need to be perfect because it's going to be hidden inside the mast step. But it needs to be reasonably close. Okay, now you can see that's round-ish. It's fairly round. It's just over 6mm. I'm just going to tidy it up with a sanding stick. So the instructions say use a file, but I don't like using files on wood. I prefer sandpaper. Still, each to their own. Now you can see that you've got a nice round reduced diameter in the mast, and that fits in the mast step very nicely. It wants to be a bit loose because the mast will go into this at an angle. Right, while I'm at it, I will do the second one. Okay, there we have a nice 2 masts reduced so they fit in the mast step. The instructions only say to do 1 at the moment, but they both need doing, so I've done both of them. So now I'm going to jump ahead again. The instructions say to put the mast step here after you've done all the beams. I'm going to do this first because I can get my fingers over the top. It's just going to make it slightly easier fitting. Okay, so that goes there. It needs a little bit carved off here so it'll fit over the frame. I'm going to start by making a couple of cuts with the razor saw. I'm just going to carve this out. Yeah, be very careful with the fingers. I'm going to carry on until it sits nicely over there. This is wobbling, so it needs to go a fair bit further. That's fitting quite snugly now. There's a bit of white glue glued in position. Make sure it's nice and square. And a tip for making sure you've got it central is shine a torch underneath and you can see equal arcs either side of the keel. Right, now we can put these deck beams in. And they go in. Again, making sure my cut line is on the starboard side. And they just need to be glued in nice and straight. And I'll do the rest by the magic cinema. And that's the last one going in now. And that's it. Now those can be left to dry overnight. Right, here we are back again. These beams are all nice and dry now. I've cut a stack of the short beams using the jig. You may notice there's a thin strip of card in there. I found it was actually a little bit too loose. I just put a little bit of card of the shim in there so the wood's just a little bit snugger fit. Makes cutting it a little bit easier. Now the first job is to mark the pencil lines. These are already marked, but there's slight variations which are probably due to errors in measurement or where the beams aren't quite glued in perfectly centrally. So I'll just redo them. So from here to here is 17 millimeters. So I'm going to mark 17 millimeters on here. Just mark 34 there. And that's their lines marked nicely. Now take our spacers and fit them. Now we can fit these in place. Okay, and I'll do the rest, work along here and then here. I'll do each row, then make sure they're in nice and straight. But I'll do these with the magic cinema. I won't bore you with fitting each one. Okay, that needs to dry properly, and then I can give this a good sanding to remove all the glue marks and the pencil marks from here. After that we can progress on to the next step. These are dried overnight now, but I'm having a second thought about how I'm going to proceed. If you jump forward in the instructions to step 13, you'll see this section of the beam needs to be cut out and the one above it. And then they ask you to build the second deck up to here. Now I think having the second deck built up to there will make it a little bit awkward to sand the first deck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out this piece here, then I'm going to wait till I've got all the frames in, complete the first deck, sand it smooth, then carry on with the second deck. So now I'm going to cut out this part with a razor saw. Now we need to be very gentle because that's actually pulled away. That's that bit come out nicely. Okay, now let's test fit the masts. Agora supplies us with this jig which we just put in place temporarily. Definitely don't glue this one in because it needs to be taken out later. That just slides in the top of the frames. The instructions say to put the deck beams in, but it's not really necessary. We're only going to make sure the hole for the mast is central and in the right position. Then we can take one of the masts and it's not quite going in the mast step. That needs a little bit of sanding here. This is a handy little tool. This is a rectangle of anodized aluminium and it comes with rectangles of self-adhesive sandpaper, various grades. Just stick them on and then you can get a nice firm pressure, and of course it's completely flat. You could use a file, but I prefer these. I find these are better for wood. Right, now we can put this one in here. Gently put that one in there. And try that, and that's more or less upright. A little bit of tinkering, I'll get that fine. Again at the bow. Try that. That's a little bit tight, but that's going in okay. Now it's best to make sure it is truly upright at this stage. You can do that by eye, making sure it looks like it's at 90 degrees to the deck. You've got a couple of options to adjust things. You can reduce the diameter of the bottom of the mast, which will allow it to move a little bit inside the mast step. Or you can sand these two a little bit wider, or a combination of both. But get it right at this stage, and then it'll be easier to sort out the next deck. Alright, so we're going to call it a day there for pack 2. Pack 3 will be continuing with these frames, and I'll continue with the first level decking, and then pack 4 is the remainder of the frames. Then I'll finish the bottom deck, then do the whole of the second deck, the whole of the third deck. So pack 3 is going to be a short one. Pack 4 will be split into several episodes because that's going to be a very long pack. Right, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it interesting and useful. And we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, leave them below. I read them all and I answer nearly all of them. Thank you. See you soon.